welcome to the Pivotal Podcast. Today we're joined by Clarinda Brewer, Associate Vice President and Clinical Informatics Officer at Lakeland Regional Health, Florida. In this episode, we'll explore Clarinda's career journey, her contributions to healthcare informatics, her role in leading informatics teams, and her insights into the evolving landscape of health technology. Clarinda, thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolutely. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation. I want to just dive right into really that aha moment, right? So, what were some of the pivotal moments or experiences that made you realize the potential of informatics in improving patient care?
Um, so I think for me, the catalyst was that our organization was moving from the paper world into the electronic world. And for me, when I was asked to be part of that team, I just saw so many opportunities. The ability to communicate so much faster, for results to come back so much faster, for the right care to get delivered faster, was just exciting. And to be part of the groundwork that was making that happen was super motivational for me. But more so, as my career has progressed, it's really how are these technologies changing the way we care for our patients. It's no longer that we need to depend on what our staff can think and remember and do, but more so where technology can help support and identify areas that we might not see as humans just trying to do our job throughout the day. So for me, it's always a changing landscape and super super fun to be part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what you just said about think and remember just kind of keyed off for me because I've definitely had a number of conversations this week talking about the impact of cognitive load
Mhm.
and the goal of the EMR, the EHR to reduce that, right? So I definitely want to dive into that a little bit later. But first off, tell me a little bit more about your previous roles and how where'd you get your start, and then how did that prepare you, or how did those roles prepare you for your current position?
Um, well, I started off as a nurse intern. So, from the time I was a child, I've always knew I wanted to be in healthcare somehow. Just helping people was always something apparently I did as a child, with the dolls and the grandparents and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's innate in my DNA. Um, but from there, I wasn't quite sure. I just knew I wanted to change the landscape. So I had big dreams. So I started at our facility for being a nurse intern. So while I was through school, I was able to, do basic nursing care to get through school. And then I became a nurse and did that for quite some time on a respiratory medical floor. Um, and I always tell people that's probably the best place to go because you'll learn real quick if this is your field or not. Um, and I kind of worked my way up. I became a supervisor and then a manager of that same unit. And during that entire process, you just learn to be a nurse. You learn to how to talk to people, how to have conflict resolution. That's huge. In our worlds, not only from a patient and a nurse perspective, but also from a manager to a nurse, et cetera. And so then I was actually targeted to be on the implementation team, and it was touted as, oh, you'll just have to make sure what they're doing in the ER doesn't infect you when it comes up, when the patient comes upstairs. And I thought, it might be bigger than that, but okay, sure, I'll do it. And so that kind of transitioned me into a role within the organization of informatics. And so for me, I was like, I feel kind of like a fake. I don't even know what informatics is. So I decided to go back to school and I got my master's in informatics so that at least I had a base knowledge of what I was supposed to be doing for this organization. Um, and then it just went on from there. I now have 15 people under me that supports the organization. And it's been a fun journey, but definitely not something I started off as. I did not wake up one day and went, informatics is for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for
no,
real.
that's not how it went. So,
For
yeah.
real. Why do you say that, and I think you said the respiratory, is
Mhm.
the ideal place to start to figure out if this is for you or not? What makes you say that?
So our unit was known as the armpit of the hospital.
Cool, that's definitely the
Yeah,
place to start.
yeah, I was
That's where
like,
I would go.
wow.
Sign me
Yeah,
up.
I was like, sounds like I'm going to war. What am I signed up for?
Yeah.
But really, what I think that does for you is number one, we got every patient possible known to man. Floors outside of ours were able to say, yeah, this patient doesn't really meet the criteria for our floor, so they have to. So we got to see everything from TB patients, mercury poisonings, alligators who ate limbs off. I mean, just
Oh my
the most
gosh.
random stuff.
That is
Um,
so Florida.
it is Florida. It
That's
is.
not every respiratory unit in the
No,
US. That's very
no.
Florida and South Carolina where I'm at. Like that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, and we did have our fair share of, our COPDers and lung cancers and things like that.
Mm,
But what made it fun was that it was literally you weren't sure what you were getting that day. So I always equate it to like one step above an ER. They might
mhm.
stabilize them, but you're coming to us unless you're going to the ICU. And so it was quite fun. Every day was something different. Every personality that we ran into was different. So it really made you flex your muscles, not only from a nursing perspective and did you know your stuff, but also from the family dynamic perspective and the throughput perspective. And it really tested you.
Wow. How long were you working before you went and got your master's?
I would say it was about 7 years, maybe.
Yeah. So you had some real world, like serious real world experience, and it wasn't just like, okay, I'm getting my bachelor's or whatever, and then going on to more theory. It was applied practice, right?
Absolutely,
Was
absolutely.
that useful in your process of getting into informatics?
Um, I would say definitely. What I use school for is it gives you the basics and it teaches you how to get stuff done, how to research things, how to use information in a meaningful way. But if you can't make it from the textbook to reality, then it's a complete waste of your money and don't bother.
Mm,
Um, so for me, anything that I learned, and I did the same thing for my bachelor or my master's in business, is when I became the manager of the nursing unit, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a business person. And so when I was going through my classes for that, it was real world experiences that solidified the education. So I was like, okay, this is how I can use this particular theory or assignment in my real world. And so that just solidified a lot of it, but also it gave me context for the class, right? I'm like, okay, I could see why this theory is important because I do this in my day to day, and this is why it's important. So it kind of works hand in hand. I feel bad for people who go through an entire process of school, master's, PhD, whatever, and then they get out in the real world and go, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. This doesn't make
yeah.
sense. Um,
Yeah.
so for me, it was very beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. So thinking about all of your experience, do any projects come to mind that maybe for you had a significant impact, or you had an opportunity to lead a project that had a significant impact on patient care or operational efficiency?
Oh, every day, every single
Mm,
day, we have something. When we first started our implementation, we did the patient's scanning of medications. So that was one of our biggest first wave projects. And that to me was defining because you got to see the nurses realize how many mistakes they had been making in the past by not using scanning technology. And so to watch them go, oh my God, I could have killed someone because I didn't read the label correctly or I didn't pay attention to the dosing. To see how technology could impact them to say, this helped me. This really does help me make better decisions and to take better care of the patient. So that one always sticks in my head. And we've had a number of stories where the patient or the patient didn't get the medication because they used the scanning technology. And really it was because a lot of drugs sound the same and look the same. And even if you're trying to be really careful, mistakes can happen. And so we would do a lot of stories of nurses who had close calls because they were scanning. And so that's passionate for me.
wow.
Yeah, currently we're working on discharge readiness, and so I'm super excited to have a bunch of nurses talking about why is discharge so hard? Why is it so hard to know what the patient's going to need when they leave? And so we're actually designing things with one of our vendors to bring a lot of information forward because information is great, the internet's great, but we're not smarter because of the internet. So it's bring that information that's meaningful forward so I can make good decisions to get the patient out safely faster.
Hmm.
And that's going to have a huge impact on our throughput and patient satisfaction, I think. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
So wait, how is that related then to informatics? Like, what are you doing specifically with that initiative?
So we're actually designing a form that lives within the EMR that basically the nurses will look at every 12 hours when they're doing their plans of care that can say, um, so that we've designed it where the chart will pull back a lot of information that's relevant for them. So do they have home health orders? What does the case manager think is going to happen with this patient? What does the doctor think is going to happen with this patient after they leave? What does the patient want to do when they go home? Um, how many orders we're still waiting on, how many consults are we still waiting on, things like that. Well, that's all informatics based because we have to design it to pull that information forward and display it in a way that nurses can look at it and see it and say, yes, I know what's happening, I know what I need to do. But then also we're designing a dashboard, if you will, so a tracker that the patient can see with check marks or X marks or whatever, so that they know on the continuum of care where they're at to say, am I even close to going home or not?
Oh,
Because I don't know
wow.
about like you guys, you stand in line at Disney and you're like, okay, it's been an hour. Am I any closer? Yeah, because Disney's really
Yeah.
good at line management. So it's kind of that idea is that if, I have more green check marks than red X's, then I'm probably close to going home. So it's a way to engage the patient in that whole journey as well, and to identify things that are their responsibility for going home. So are you up walking? Are you arranging your home health care? Like those types of things. And so it's just a way to bring it all together. So we're excited about that. But that's all driven by informatics, with
Yeah,
the
that's
input
awesome.
from our clinical staff.
Yeah, no, that's super good because it really does empower patients also to take proactive steps in managing their own care, participating in their own care, right? That's
Exactly.
great. And I think about like even simple things like forms I have to fill out online. Like if I'm seeing that progress bar, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm at 80%. Like I've got this
Exactly.
expectation of like where I'm at. And if it was like,
Exactly.
oh, that's hospital stay, and if I would listen to the nurses and the doctor and start doing what they're telling me to do, I would get closer to being home instead of just being like, oh, I should be doing this because you're telling me to. It's like, no,
Right.
there's going to be a tangible impact. Like I can get out of here.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And it seems like that would have a really quantifiable positive impact for the hospital, which I know in informatics can be tough to demonstrate, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like demonstrating your value in informatics saying, hey, this awareness is shortening length of stay. So we're
Mhm.
seeing more patients and driving more revenue. And the patients are having better outcomes too, because nobody wants to be in the hospital.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and we actually part of our projects always have metrics attached to them for that reason. Is that are we improving whatever process we said we want to improve? And so as part of this project, there's like three metrics we're going to measure. And it's patient satisfaction, it's throughput, are we shortening that time so that it can translate that, we are worth our money, is that you have tangible monies that you're getting back somehow.
Yeah.
Um, because it's always
Cool.
important to the bottom line to look at those things, right? I mean, that's how you keep your doors open.
Totally. That's absolutely because, and I think that what I keep hearing is that it's tough, especially for nurses, because the heart is, I got into this because I want to help people.
Correct.
But if everything you're doing like bleeds money and you have to shut the doors, then you're not able to help anyone.
That's exactly right.
Wow,
Yeah.
cool. So with this, and you're talking about working on it, working with a vendor to develop this, I'm sure that with the advent of technology and advancements, like things are changing all the time, right? So how do you stay on top of that and then go about making informed decisions about how to integrate new technologies into the work that you're doing?
So for me, I call it the shiny object syndrome, and I am not really good at that. I am a techie. I love new stuff. If there's a new app, I'm probably going to look at it. But from an organization standpoint, what I stand for from my informatics hat is what is the goal, the strategic initiatives of the organization? And so, everyone is really good about going to a conference and seeing something cool, or, oh, I saw this ad come up on my feed, or whatever. And so I get a lot of questions about could we have this? Could we have that? But the one tried and true method that we have found is that I will only focus if you can articulate how that's going to benefit the strategic plan that's outlined for the next 5 years.
Oh,
Because
cool.
if not, we don't have time or money.
Yep.
So a lot of those fall to the wayside because they can't articulate how it will impact. And I do that because it's too easy for people to say, oh, well, you go figure it out. Mm-mm. So if you tie it back to your strategic plan, it helps so much. And then once they tell me that, then we look at, okay, what vendor are you finding, or technology or app or whatever it may be? And then my job is to go look for alternatives. Are there other companies that are also doing the same thing? Is it part of some, maybe we already have a company that can do it, we just didn't purchase it, right? So that's where I start to investigate our different options, and then we look at it, and if it's reasonable and it makes sense, then we'll do demos and pricing and those types of things. And sometimes the pricing just knocks it out of the water, right? I mean, some of these are insane.
Sure.
um,
That that
but
makes a ton of sense. I mean, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? But
right,
if you have a strategic vision in mind, especially a 5-year vision, that's awesome, because it's a really easy yes or no. Will this help us achieve that? Yes or no.
exactly.
That's
Yep.
great. Now, you mentioned conferences, and for somebody who is new to the industry and learning so much about it, because I don't have a healthcare background, right?
Right. Hmm.
Where are there any that you would recommend, or say somebody else who's listening who's interested in transitioning into health informatics in some way, maybe from nursing, maybe from something else?
Sure.
Yeah, any great conferences that are like, oh, you should definitely go attend that. That'd be worthwhile.
So conferences, they can be expensive. So, I tend to not go to a ton. Um, But the two that I consistently will go to is always belong to ANIA. So that's your American Nursing Informatics Association. If you're interested in, think about informatics, want to be part of informatics, that is one that I think it's $99 a year or something. And it is a tremendous resource, and it connects a lot of people in the industry together. They have a ton of education opportunities, things like that, and they put on a really good conference. And they also have regional groups. So they have the collective, let's say Southeastern, which is a lot of Florida. So I get to meet a lot of our colleagues at different organizations, which opens up the door for conversations. Like maybe I'm struggling with a particular process at our organization, so it allows for that crossover. And I know a lot of our colleagues, we talk all the time about different things, and that's really helpful. So that's one I would say hands down always belong to. um, but the others is, whatever your vendor of choice is for your organization, if it's Epic or Cerner or Allscripts or whatever, um, they always have a yearly conference, and figure out how to get yourself in there, because it's really interesting to me when you go to those types of conferences. They have it for all kinds of topics. I mean, there'll be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of speakers. So you can find a topic that interests you, but really it's about seeing what your vendor can offer, what other people are doing within your vendor. Maybe it gives you some ideas. So I always recommend those. After that, I would say something along the lines of hymns, or um, your nurse executive type conferences, or your nurse leader conferences. There's a number of them out there, but all of those offer up a way for you to understand what's happening in other areas, what other hospitals are struggling with, what ideas they have that you could probably bring back to your organization. HIMSS is huge in the technical world, so it's a lot of vendors, a lot of, kind of, you got to be careful about that whole shiny object situation when you go there. But it really is about what a lot of people are doing in the industry, and I think that's a way to just see possibilities. Does this work? Could this work? Oh, I didn't think of that. That type of stuff is what I gain from those. And the other thing I gain, and which I send my team to all the time, is we're doing pretty good. I know the day to
Yeah.
day is, you think we're terrible at what we do, but when you put us against other people, we're top notch. We're up there on the
Yep.
things that we're producing and working on. So it's kind of nice to get that level set to go, oh yeah, we are okay. We've got this.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome. It's exciting to me to hear you speak so highly of Ania, because just a little preview, I am going to be recording a podcast episode with past president Carolyn Harmon next week.
nice, nice.
And I'm also very excited about that conversation. So
Yes.
cool. So, okay, so let's think about your team. You talked about your team a little bit.
Mhm.
What kind of qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership in informatics, right? So in your role, to execute your role effectively, and if somebody is thinking long term, we think about that 5-year strategic plan, or 10 or 20 years, and they're thinking, hey, I'm interested in informatics, but there are a lot of pathways. Where could this ultimately lead? And then, okay, it could lead there. And if I know where it could possibly go, if I have an accurate picture of that, I can assess, is that where I'd like to be? Can I see myself doing that?
Right. Um, so I would say if we started off as the CNIO role, so that is the top of your informatics ladder. Um, Organizations might call them different things, but it's your chief nursing informatics officer. And what I would say is that that skill set has to be number one, communication. Can you communicate effectively to people who don't know what you do? Most people in an organization have no idea what we do. They think we're part of IT. They think we're part of the help desk. They think we're part of, nursing. They don't know. They have no idea. And so it's really, can we communicate what we do and what we need to be doing? The second piece is, are you good at conflict management? Because my job 90% of the time is to tell somebody no. And that doesn't go over well. But it's more about, tell me what you're looking for and how can I help you achieve it? And so I would say effective communication is huge. And the third thing is prioritizing real work. You will get inundated with things that don't matter. And you can chase your tail, you can chase the cats on an open bed truck for a long time if you don't have a way to really identify the things that matter and come up with a plan to achieve those goals. And stick to it, because we always use the term alligator closest to the boat. Well, that's fine for a lot of things, but not for a CNIO type of role, right? Like, I have to keep my eye on the prize, the long-term goal, the vision. My managers, they're dealing with the alligators closest to the boat, right? Here's my plan. How are we going to get there? And then the day-to-day alligator that might be chomping at your heels, right? So I would say from that perspective. And then from an informatics role itself, communication, the ability to see process. Can you look at something and say, how do I break this down into the easiest process steps? If you can't do that, informatics is not for you. That will make you crazy in this department. If you cannot, just take an example of making a peanut butter sandwich. Write out every step it takes to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If that annoys you, do not get into this field. Don't do it.
Yep. Yep.
Because
Yep.
that is what we do. That is every day, is just breaking down processes, and then how do we rebuild them in a way that makes
Yep.
sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's always so many more steps than you'd think. You're like, peanut butter jelly sandwich, like that's not that
Easy.
hard. Grab the peanut butter, grab it, whatever. And you're like, no, there's like 4 steps that you missed right there,
Correct.
actually. And if and in your industry, if somebody missed those,
Mhm.
there's a real problem. Like people's
Correct.
lives, their health are on the line, right? I had
Correct.
a friend that just asked me this week, like, hey, would you break down your podcast process for me and the resources and everything? So, and I don't love writing stuff out. So I
Right.
thought that's fine. I mean, I record my other meetings as well. Like I have an AI note taking assistant. So
Mhm.
I'm talking with one of my team members and I'm like, hey, we need to break down this process for this friend. So I'm just going to verbally process it with you. And if we miss anything, we'll go reinsert it. And so I just talked it out and it recorded it all. And then we
Nice.
dropped the transcript into Chat GPT, and we were like, hey, list out the process, the steps, and the resources that I mentioned. And it created this amazing document for us. And like we had to tweak it a little bit, but it did so much of the heavy lifting. It was amazing.
Nice.
So super good. I love technology like that. That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, absolutely.
So thinking about like the culture of your team, how do
Mhm.
you foster a culture of innovation and then continuous improvement?
Um, well, for me, I think the first thing is that you have to care about them as people. A lot of leadership is, they're people, they can come to work, they do their thing, you outline it, they'll be good. That doesn't always work out. So for me, is we are very much a family. We know everybody's idiosyncrasies and what they're good at and what they're not. And I think that's important as a leader. Um, but more so is that I also tell them that they are the CEO of their service line. So our teams are broken up by service line. So you might be the women and children's CI, or the medical CI, or whatever. So what I tell them is, if they fail, you fail, and vice versa. If you fail, they fail. So you have a lot of autonomy to make it work on what they're trying to achieve, and your success or their success. So that really limits my ability to micromanage them. Number one, I don't know all the things they're doing, and I don't want to. I don't have time for that. But also, it really elevates them to say, I'm in charge and I need to make this work. And so, what's really fun about that is that they'll come to me and say, I might have messed up. I went against this boundary. Should I come back? Should I not? What should I do? And so, a lot of times, I'm more like, that's a great idea. Fantastic. Way to hit for the fence. However, let's dial it back a little bit. Or how do you see yourself getting there? And so it just changes the dynamic of those conversations versus me going, can you go do this? Can you go do that? Go make this happen. They're more bringing it to me. And they have a lot of latitude. I don't tell them no very often. I try really hard not to, actually.
That's awesome. So with that, it takes a special person though to be able to grant them that latitude, right? So when you're looking at hiring these people, what are some of the biggest hiring challenges that you face? And then how do you approach finding the right talent to meet those needs?
Yeah, that's interesting because the pool ebbs and flows. Sometimes we get really great candidates that have a ton of experience in the field. Other times we have zero experience and they're just trying to get their foot in the door. I'm open to all of it depending on what's happening on the team at that moment. It's for me, I can teach you how to be an informatician in the sense of here's the tools we use, here's how you set up a meeting, here's how you follow up on tickets, here's how you process a request, those types of things. What I can't give you is a passion for your service line. If you are not passionate about making something better, I don't need you. I don't want you. If you think that this job is just easier than bedside, I don't need you because it's not. It's actually really, really hard in different ways. Um, but I do look for people who are energetic and who can articulate things they've done already to improve something. And it doesn't have to be informatics related, but really someone who can tell me, oh yeah, I saw that we were really struggling with this on our unit and I did the following things. Great. That's initiative. That shows me that you can see things and can look at it, break it down and improve. Sometimes our nursing staff that come to the department don't really have a lot of experience with that, right? Because they're a nurse on the floor. They just take care of their patients and they want to go home. But even within that, tell me when you identified a patient problem. Tell me what you did to fix it, those types of things to really see if they understand why they did what they did is usually someone that catches my attention. A lot of times people don't think they know informatics and yet their actions really are informatics based. And so it's really trying to weave through some of their answers to figure out if that's what's going on or not.
Interesting.
But then it's really about the dynamic of the team. I've got to be honest. I got to see how they interact with our team during the interview process. So if they're very stoic and don't really respond, they're probably not going to work. That's not the culture.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard a number of things like love for technology, problem solving abilities, communication skills, maybe some thick skin because you're telling people no, right?
Absolutely.
What's interesting in this to me is I feel like I get the sense that there's this assumed tension between the clinical side of things and then the informatics side of things, almost as if like, oh, informatics is taking nurses and we're already at a shortage, right? And I don't know, maybe that's exaggerated in my mind because of the conversations I have, because if you look at like the size of a nursing staff versus the size of an informatics team, right? But I started thinking about it just yesterday, even how could we use informatics to reduce burnout, to improve retention, and to overcome that talent shortage, especially when it comes to nursing, because it's also, like as I'm having more of these conversations, I'm hearing more and more the nurse is the primary end user of like the EMR, the EHR, right? Like they have their hands in it more than anybody. So it seems like there's a real opportunity for impact there. And it also seems like one of the biggest challenges in healthcare right now is that nursing talent shortage. And yeah, I know we can do things like trying to drive more students into the educational programs. That's great. But when you've got a sinking ship, you need to plug the holes first, right?
And that's one thing our organization is really, really good at. That was recognized a few years ago before it kind of blew up. And so from our nursing side of the house, they were really trying to figure out what is it that nurses need that to make them stay, right? And pay is always going to be up there, because if I can do the same job and down the road for a little bit better money, I'm probably going to do that. But that's really not the whole of the problem. We have a lot of people who leave the organization and come back because it's not so green on the other side. Um, However, what I think from an informatics perspective, and one of the things that we're working on right now, is our job is to make your job easier. And so really identifying those things that are still tying nurses down, what's taking too long, those types of things, and how can we fix it? I'll give you an example. A few years ago, nurses were like, oh my God, this intake form is ridiculous. Every patient, it takes forever, blah, blah, blah. Which is true. Why? Because if there's an incident, put it on the initial nursing assessment so that it doesn't get missed again. Well, years of that, guess what? That thing is now ridiculously long and obnoxious. And so we did a complete revamp of how nurses document, probably about 4 years ago now. And they went from 7 minutes on average down to 3.5 minutes to fill out a form. And again, on every single patient every day, that's a lot. That's a lot of minutes we're giving back. Um, and so this discharge preparedness is bringing that information forward, is really taking that burden off of them to go find the information and figure out what's happening and all those. And so what I always tell people is our job is to figure out what you need to be successful. And the thing we're focusing on right now, is we've heard from nursing and others, it's everywhere, is that our education on hire is really not robust enough for the EMR. Number one, you can't figure it all out in a week. That's ridiculous. Nobody can do that. And so what can my teams do to reinforce the EMR training in that crucial 6-week period when you first come on as a nurse, to really make sure you understand how the system works, how it's here to help you, how to use it efficiently. But more than that is, how do we continue that throughout your career? So do we have multiple training sessions? Do we have tips and tricks classes? Do we have people who can see your usage in the system and say, oh, she's really struggling with orders. Let me go set some time up with her and show her how to do it better. That kind of stuff. And so that's where we see, especially in our journey right now, where my informatics can really make a difference. I mean, we're still doing process improvement things, and that will always happen. But I think right now that's the focus of our department, is really honing in on people who are struggling. And we've had great feedback. I mean, a lot of them are saying, I wish I had this sooner. This is so much helpful, things like that. So we know that it's positive, and we want to continue those things. So in our organization, they do view us as a team member and helping them, and they do see value. But I've got to tell you, it's a lot of hard work from my team members that make that so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you hit on so many things right there. And I want to go back to a couple really quickly.
Mhm.
When it comes to people leaving and coming back,
Mhm.
referred to as like boomerang employees, I've
Mhm.
just been recently digging into some statistics on those. And depending on the reason for leaving and the reason for coming back, they can often turn out to be some of the most productive, most engaged workers, because they know what they're coming back to, and they're fully bought in because they know the grass isn't greener, right? So that's
Absolutely.
one really good thing, actually. Number two is that there are some really compelling statistics around when employees leave and their reason for leaving a role is better pay. If that's their major reason for leaving, and it's also, if you're looking at hiring somebody and they're coming to you and their reason is pay, then that's often a kind of a red flag. Like, that's not a great hire potentially, because like as soon as they
Those
can get
shows
that somewhere
underneath.
else,
Exactly.
exactly. So it's not, there needs to be something more intrinsic that's driving their engagement in the organization, right?
Absolutely.
And then the thing that you said about cutting those new patient like intake times from 7 minutes to 3.5. I mean, if we were to just kind of multiply that out, how many patients does one nurse see, like new patients, on a daily basis?
I think the average was about 5 per unit. So our bed capacity is almost 900 a day, and I think a third, like about 160, I think the last time I read it, were new patients. So 160 new patients a day.
160 new patients a day
Mhm.
times a savings of 3.5 minutes.
Mhm.
I mean, that's like 500 minutes you're saving,
Mhm.
right? Like it's almost 10 hours, right? You're looking at like 9 hours of labor, 10 hours of labor per day
per day.
by cutting a form in half.
Correct. And they didn't lose any information. So we
That's
didn't
astounding.
lose, we didn't lose information about the patient, right? It was really just cleaning it up and saying, why do we ask this? Is it
Yep.
necessary? Do we do anything with it? If not, get rid of it.
Yep.
Or vice versa, right? Is how do we, do you need it? Okay, where does it make sense? Do you need it in the first 24 hours? No, then move it somewhere else, right? So it was a lot of that. So yeah, I mean, we were super excited, and actually, it's through Cerner, and I've presented our optimization many times through different conferences about how successful it was.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super, super good. So you mentioned like the onboarding process, and I love that. So people listening could be interested in transitioning into informatics, right? Maybe they're from the outside.
Absolutely.
So talking about this, I think could be useful for giving them an idea of what to expect. But also, I think it's really useful to share information among leaders in the industry, because then you can share best practices like you're talking about at these conferences, right? What's working for us. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that onboarding process for new team members for you looks like in your department?
Sure. So it really depends on what they're coming to the table with. So, for example, I just hired someone who has a ton of experience. Her onboarding is going to be very different than someone who has never really been in the field, maybe just graduated from their master's program, that kind of thing. And so it really depends on what they're bringing to the table. Um, One of the things that I would always tell anyone interested in getting into the field is be a super user on your unit. Um, be on your project teams, be in nurse governance where processes are being improved, and work with your informaticians to figure out how to make something better, right? Because that's a way for you as a person to know, is this for me? Does this make sense in my head? Can I do this? But also it helps my informaticians know if you're any good at it, right? So that's number one. Is if you're good at that, we're probably going to help you get a job with us, right? If you're kind of lazy and don't really do a good job and don't follow up, you're probably not going to get the job. So to me, it's like the perfect interviewing is real life. So I always encourage newbies who want to get into it. That's the way I would suggest it within your own organization. The second piece is for us is once we do hire you, again, let's take someone who was maybe just a super user on the floor, which is great. We will probably take it as, okay, let's start with some of the easier things. Maybe you're going to be in charge of watching all the tickets that come in, and I want you to troubleshoot how you would fix it. And then you work with the CI to make sure A, that's correct, or B, how would you investigate, or C, right? So we would teach you those types of things. And then we would progress you through. Maybe it's that you can only work on orders, right? So if power plans need to be updated, or order sets, however you want to call them, need to be updated, that's your function, right? So you get all of them in the organization until you get good at it. Or maybe we move you up into clinical documentation regarding forms, like that you can understand how they all work together and how do you find information and how do you build them correctly. And then eventually we would give you a service line depending on how well you did, right? We've tried it in the past where we just give you a service line and we help you with whatever comes down the path. But if you don't have a lot of experience, that doesn't tend to work too well. So we have moved to a different model of basically giving you little chunks of very defined processes, and then if you can do it, we'll add more. Um,
Yeah. How
so
long
that's
does
we.
this whole process take? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I would say it takes about an average about a year to really think that you're going to transition and take on your own units. I mean, we've had
Wow.
some faster, we've had some slower, um, but a year I would say is a fair estimate.
Okay.
Because there's just
I
a
love,
lot. There's a
yeah.
lot.
I no, I think it's really helpful to set realistic expectations. A lot of disappointment in life comes from unmet expectations. So if you
Absolutely.
think I'm going to come in and everything's going to be easy and I'm going to crush it within like the first 90 days, it's like, well, you're going to be setting yourself up for some disappointment.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I mean, our team has been together for a very long time, 12 plus years. Um, and a lot of us were here from the ground up. So we still today, even today, this morning, I'm like, hey, what did we say about this? Why did we do this like this? What's new in this? You're constantly learning and you don't know everything. And so you've got to be okay with not knowing. I don't know a lot of things, a lot of days. I have to research, I have to look, I have to go talk to people. And if you're someone who thinks you're going to be an expert in informatics, you won't. And
Mm,
if you think you are, you're not, and that's scary to me.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure.
um, yeah, it's always a learning opportunity. Always, every day, something new. Somebody does something new. Somebody figures something out, and you're like, "How did that happen?" I mean, it's every day. So,
Yeah, that's exciting though. That's the exciting thing about it. So, and you mentioned too, like professional development too, right? So how do you ensure ongoing professional development for your team?
so for me, because of where we're at in our tenure, I guess as a team, my big focus is you need to share this knowledge. You need to start sharing. We are doing good stuff here. You need to be presenting. We need to be writing. We need to be publishing. Um, we need to be going to conferences. So, what are we doing to share the knowledge out? And I think it's important because then they realize that what they're doing is good. Um, but also, it makes them want to be better. Every single one of my staff belong to either a NIA or some kind of accreditation body of some sort. And so the expectation is that you have to do certain education requirements. Our yearly requirements are picked out by our leadership um, within our department to say these are the courses that you need to take. And so there are things like change management, leadership development, how to do meetings correctly. I mean, all kinds of things go into that bucket. And so we're constantly every year giving them new classes that they have to take that are part of being an informatician. And
So is it things like project management, Six Sigma, like those types of things?
I don't force them to do the Six Sigma proper and get certified, but they are pieces and parts of Six Sigma. Absolutely.
Cool. That's super cool.
And if they
Um,
want to, they can certainly take the exam. That's up to them, but it's not a requirement of the job.
yeah, no, that's great. When you're thinking about, okay, we're bringing these people in, we're training them, we're developing them. What are some of the KPIs that you track to make sure that people are meeting their goals or your department is meeting its goals?
Um, so the big thing that I look at right now is our ticket volume and ticket management because all of our requests that we work are pretty much in a ticket format. So for me, I always look at what's their turnaround times for tickets, what is their follow up on tickets. Um, is there an area of opportunity that we need to start looking at on those types of things? The other thing I look at is from each of their projects, they have to have metrics. So what improvement did you make for those projects? And so that's what I share with our upper leadership when I go to them to defend. I need more people, or don't fire any of my people, or whatever. Is those types of things to say, okay, but on this project, we saved you 500 hours of nursing time. I don't want to hear from you for the next year. That's a lot of money, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But really individually, it's more about their daily management of things because I think if you don't pay attention to that, then he goes off the rails way too far, and you can't always get it back under control. So to me, that's where my focus usually is for them. And I say that because I do it through their managers, but that's usually the one. And then the soft skill stuff is what kind of feedback are we getting from your users? So when I go around on a department or whatever, I better hear that they know who you are, that they know that we've done stuff for them, that you work well together. Like I should hear positives from every single person. And so they know that those kudo marks are just as important as their tickets. And um, I think that really shows their involvement in their unit. And like I said, they're the CEO of their unit, so they need to make sure that people know who they are and how to help and what they can do and those types of things. And so they hate when I go rounding because they're like, "Don't you're gonna find the one person I haven't talked to." I'm like, probably. So I guess you should find out where they're at and talk to them.
Yeah,
That kind
right.
of stuff. And so it makes it fun, but it's also a way to share good stuff that's happening. So I
That's
like.
awesome. Yeah, that's great. Catch somebody doing something right.
Yes, absolutely.
That's so good.
Hmm.
So thinking about just like, I don't know, reducing burnout overall, uh, what do you do personally, or what do you encourage your team to do to manage stress and then maintain that healthy work-life balance?
My team will tell you that I'm a Nazi about it, which is kind of funny. But it's important to me. I worked a long time where I thought, putting all these hours in, I was the best employee, right? Because I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I was accomplishing all these things. And I learned that if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, no organization is going to come to a halt. No one's going to really care, except for that hour for my funeral, that something's awry. So it's really a moment in time. And actually, I was on a safari in Africa when I realized this, that I need to care about me to care about anyone else. And so when I got back from that, I said, okay, what can I do about that? How am I part of the problem if I'm creating that same work ethic for my staff, right? So what I decided was that family and outside life is more important than what you're doing here. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people who are in a leadership role, but it's not. Because here's my thought process is, if my staff have a healthy, happy relationship with their spouse, with their kids, their life outside of here, they're not going to have the drama when they come here. And they can focus on things here. And I try really, really hard to say it's time to go, wrap it up. That'll be here tomorrow. You did great for today. Let's pick this up tomorrow. I send them home early sometimes, like Fridays. They know if we're here past 2:00, that's not okay for me. Like, what are we doing? Let's go. I realize that you think we need to be here till 5, but I don't. So let's wrap it up. I encourage vacation. I actually said to one of my staff, I said, you're getting grumpy, go on vacation. Take a few days. We'll figure it out, that kind of thing. So you have to be intent in your action and not just words, right? Let's say you really say work-life balance, and then I send you 47 emails on a Friday night and expect you to have an answer by Monday morning. Like, that's not right. So I try really, really hard not to do that. I don't reach out unless it's an emergency. And to be honest, I couldn't tell you the last time I reached out to somebody on their day off or off hours or what have you. But it's important to me. And I tell them that. I said, guys, if you think for 1 second that you're going to be missed more than 15 minutes after you stop working here, you're delusional. So let's figure it out. I love you. I think you're great. But the rest of the organization is going to keep going. And I think it's very freeing in that mindset.
Totally. One thing I really like as a leader is, so we use Slack for communication, and like my team members, they can snooze. They set Slack to snooze in their off hours. So if I have a thought, I don't have to carry that cognitive burden till tomorrow. It's like 11:00 last night. I'm sending Josh some messages about some things, but I have the freedom to do that because I can reduce my cognitive load. And it's not, but we've got that boundary in place. So it's also not imposing on him, right? Because I like to respect that off work too. But a couple of things you said really just resonate so much. So with the whole idea of like, what your role is really and what our roles in life are. And I've talked about this before, but as a husband, like my wife only gets me. As a dad, my kids only get me. Now, what I'm doing in my work, I believe in and I find a lot of purpose in, but other people can do similar things like helping health informatics organizations find great people, right? Or helping health informatics leaders build their teams, right? Other people can do that, but nobody else is able to provide the support as a husband to my wife. No one else is able to play baseball for 20 minutes with my son in the mornings before I come to work, right? It's just me. So if I'm doing a bad job at that, like that's what they're stuck with. So it's my duty to provide the very best that I can in those areas. And it does, like, it makes life so much more. Just there's so much more. It's richer. It's more fulfilling that when I'm at work, I can be fully present at work because I don't have those home things like the drama you're talking about hanging over me, right? So that's huge. But the other thing you talk about safari, I love travel. Absolutely love travel. I'm leaving next Thursday to go to Spain for a Mediterranean cruise and then hanging out in Spain for a few weeks even. Plug for Home Exchange. This podcast is not sponsored by Home Exchange, but you should check out Home Exchange if you don't use it, because literally, like, we're already going to be there and I can work remotely. We'll see how the podcast goes abroad. There'll be, I'm sure, tech issues, whatever, but We've got a free house to stay in Pamplona, Spain for 9 days because I'm
Oh,
just trading with somebody. So we
that's
can go
beautiful.
see the running of the bulls, you know? And it's like, that's a
Oh,
lifetime experience, or like a once in a
absolutely,
lifetime kind of thing.
absolutely.
But here's the thing. It is great to go get away and have those experiences and get rejuvenated and recharge, and it improves our creativity and all this. But I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of believing the lie that we have to have those to sustain like our happiness on a daily basis, right? Because those are few and far between. That's like a once a year or once every couple of years. So the real question comes down to like when it's work-life balance, what can I do today to
Correct.
improve my mental well-being, right? So like this morning, I played baseball with my 5-year-old for 20
Absolutely.
minutes probably. I snuggled with my 3-year-old on the couch and looked at pictures of a trip we did to Edisto Island on the this creek we were staying at a couple days last week. But even beyond that, like today on my lunch break, you can see right behind me here, there's a skateboard, a longboard right behind me, right?
Yep.
I love this thing so much because I can use it to play with my kids, which is great. But I've got an extra one in my car. So another guy that runs a business upstairs from me at lunch today, we're going to go out and we're just going to get some sunshine and cruise around, you know, for 15 or 30 minutes. So
Absolutely.
life is too short to spend any day where we don't find some moment of joy or happiness. So what is that? You know, if you're listening, like what does that look like for today? How
Mhm.
can you go find some time to be happy today? I love that so much. That's great. Um, I know we've only got a few minutes left. Let me see if there was anything burning that I really wanted to ask. I think this is a really powerful question, but just looking back where you've come from and where you are today, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self starting this journey, what would it be?
Um, I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of what comes in front of you. Don't be afraid to say yes. Um, there is no way that I knew my life would be where it's at right now. And I'm a planner, so the fact that I'm telling you that is like against everything in my body. But it really is that people see in you things you don't see in yourself, and trust that. Trust that people that you work with, that you interact with, can see a part of you that you can't. And if they put an opportunity in front of you, take it. Take it 100% of the time, because you need that lesson, whatever that may be, anyway. Whether you, and I'll be honest, I had no idea how to be a manager of a medical unit. I had no idea how to be an informatician. I had no idea how to be a CNIO. But you know what? I'm doing it. And I learned a whole lot because of that. I learned I can be stronger than that. I can do presentations. I can do these things that I thought were so out of my realm. Um, and you'll figure it out. There's people here around that will help you figure it out. So don't be afraid. Just do it. And you'll be so thankful in the end. Um, I think that's probably my biggest message to anyone, is just do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's such a note in there for other leaders as well. I mean, as a leader, you've got this amazing opportunity to steward your people and to pour into them. And as a mentor, and you can recognize and encourage that potential and foster that in someone else. I mean, what
Absolutely.
a gift you have to give somebody else when you recognize that and you can provide these opportunities for them. So
And it's
hopefully
not
that's
about
useful.
you. Like, that's the other
Mm,
thing. As a leader, I'm not afraid of any of my people leaving. I'm not
mm,
afraid to give them those opportunities that might take them away from this organization, because it's about them as people. Be better, do better for the world. It's not about me. And so I think a lot of leaders might not want to give so many opportunities because it might open too many doors. And I get that. Um,
mm,
but it's not about you. It's
mm-hmm.
about the person in front of you, and what can we do to be better as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, it positively impacts them, and then there's a ripple effect with how many other people they're gonna positively impact because of it. And
Absolutely.
honestly, like, when you have those opportunities and you're feeling that growth, it really increases your engagement too, which improves your retention anyway. It's counterintuitive, but it's like
It,
giving these people, like, this opportunity to become their best selves and realize their full potential actually makes them say, "Hey, I appreciate that you enable me to do that. I'm loyal to you. I want to be with you."
yeah, because they're looking for the next great thing to happen,
Mm,
and so they do. They want to share that, and I've had. I mean, I had one leave because he needed to go somewhere else. Like, this was not his job. But for the most part, the people that have been here have left because of better opportunities. So better, one went to be a director, one, you know what I mean? So they are improving their professional development, right? But still within the same organization. So I don't feel like that's a loss, right? I didn't fail somehow, but it was more about, okay, I set them up to be better. I set them up to do better, and they did. Yay. Like
Yeah,
that benefits everybody.
for
Yeah.
sure.
So
It's so
it's so
crazy.
exciting. Yeah.
And it's so crazy how we fall into this believing this lie of like tribalism, this us versus them. It could be like our unit, our team versus the other one, but it's all the same organization.
Absolutely.
Or like our organization versus another. It's like, no, we're all part of the same
Correct.
society. Let's love our neighbors well. And if anybody wins and healthcare improves, everybody wins.
Everybody. Absolutely. And that's why I'm always sharing. You had Mark on the podcast not too long ago, and it's the same. We share all kinds of things. Same thing with Baycare. I mean, we're all in it together. So if you figured it out, awesome. And if I figured it out, I'll share.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. That's so great. Well, Clarinda, thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us. I really appreciate it today.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Yeah. To our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this episode. So you can share your comments on LinkedIn or directly on the podcast website at pivotal.buzzsprout.com. And if you know somebody who would find this episode inspiring or beneficial, share it with them. You can share it directly on LinkedIn or through Buzzsprout. And really, it's anywhere you can get your podcast. So we're on Spotify, Apple, literally just go to pivotal.buzzsprout.com and you'll be able to see it there. So in the meantime, stay tuned for more episodes here on the Pivotal Podcast.